Hello, my friend. Tonight we dim the lights. Perhaps you've brewed a calming herbal tea, and we settle into a journey through a fascinating, often misunderstood aspect of human history, the intimate lives and practices of the Aztec Empire. You might think you know a thing or two about ancient civilizations, but trust me, what we're about to uncover will likely surprise you, perhaps even make you blush a little. We're stepping into a world where normal was a vastly different concept, where gender, love, and desire flowed in currents you might not have imagined. You'll learn about practices that were, by modern standards, incredibly bizarre, or perhaps refreshingly liberated. You probably won't survive this journey without at least one jaw-dropping moment, a realization that your own cultural lens is perhaps far narrower than you thought. It's like peeking behind the velvet curtain of time and discovering an entirely different play. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in the bustling heart of Tenochtitlan, the magnificent capital of the Aztec Empire, long before the Spanish conquistadors set foot on its shores. The air hums with activity, the cries of market vendors, the rhythmic pounding of obsidian blades, and the distant hum of chanting from the towering temples. This wasn't a society that separated the sacred from the sensual. Instead, you'll discover that Aztec sexuality was complex, ritualized, and intertwined with the cosmos. Every intimate act, from procreation to pleasure, often held layers of spiritual meaning, reflecting a worldview where human actions mirrored divine forces. It's like living in a giant, open-air cathedral where even your bedroom is part of the grand altar. You observe the daily life, quickly noticing that many aspects of Aztec existence, including sexuality, were governed by a sophisticated calendar system and a pantheon of deities. Each day, each month, each festival had its associated gods, and many of these deities directly oversaw aspects of fertility, passion, and childbirth. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec religious beliefs profoundly influenced and integrated human sexuality into daily life and ritual meant that intimacy was rarely just a private affair. It was a cosmic dance, a participation in the divine creative force. Imagine having a sex life that literally helped the sun rise. No pressure, right? A quirky or fringe tidbit you might uncover is the existence of specific calendrical days considered particularly auspicious or inauspicious for sexual activity. Engaging in intercourse on certain days might be believed to bring bad luck or spiritual impurity, while on others, it could enhance fertility or bring blessings. It's like a cosmic dating app, but instead of swiping left or right, you're checking a sacred almanac for the best bedroom weather. Historians still argue whether the common people meticulously followed these calendrical sexual restrictions in their daily lives, or if they were primarily observed by priests and the elite during specific ceremonial periods. As you wander through the vibrant marketplaces, you notice artisans crafting elaborate sculptures and paintings. Many of these artworks, even those seemingly mundane, contain subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, sexual symbolism. A carved serpent might represent fertility, while certain floral motifs could allude to feminine beauty and procreation. You realize that the human body and its generative power were not subjects of shame, but sources of wonder and reverence, openly depicted in various forms of artistic expression. The very structure of Aztec society, with its emphasis on lineage and agricultural bounty, necessitated a robust understanding and often ritualization of sexuality. Children were seen as gifts from the gods, and the continuity of the family and the state depended on successful procreation. This created a societal context where sexual matters, far from being taboo, were openly acknowledged and managed, often through communal rituals and strict social codes. It was a world where bringing new life into existence was not just a personal choice, but a cosmic duty, ensuring the very survival of the world. You might even hear whispers of specific deities, like Xochiquetzal, the goddess of flowers, fertility, beauty, and sexual pleasure, or her male counterpart, Macuilxocotl, god of games, feasting, and excess, including sexual indulgence. These weren't just abstract concepts. They were living forces, influencing the daily lives and intimate choices of the Aztec people. Their temples stood as testaments to the power of creation, both human and natural, reminding everyone that life itself was a divine gift, to be celebrated and at times ritually honored through acts of profound intimacy. It's a far cry from a society where discussions about sex are relegated to hushed tones and hidden corners. The Aztecs understood that the cycles of nature, the planting, the growth, the harvest, mirrored the cycles of human life. Therefore, ensuring the fertility of the land was often intertwined with ensuring the fertility of the people. This deep ecological connection meant that sexual practices could take on an almost sacred agricultural significance. You might see a farmer offering a small, phallic-shaped figurine to the earth before planting, a quiet prayer for abundance. It's a beautiful, if sometimes startling, integration of the human and the natural world, where your most personal actions could have grand, cosmic implications. From the cosmic intertwining of general Aztec sexuality, you now descend into the vibrant and sometimes startling realm of their fertility cults, where honoring deities was paramount to ensuring bountiful harvests and the continuation of life. You're stepping into a world where the very act of procreation, both human and agricultural, was believed to be a direct reflection of divine will and a necessary act of supplication to the gods. It's a bit like believing your gardening skills directly influenced the sun, but with far more dramatic consequences if things went wrong. You might witness a procession in honor of Toki, our grandmother, a revered earth and fertility goddess, or Tlazolteotl, the goddess of filth, purification, and passionate love, who also presided over childbirth. This mainstream historical fact that the Aztecs revered a pantheon of deities associated with fertility, earth, and agricultural abundance, often through elaborate cults and rituals, was central to their survival and prosperity. Imagine a spiritual system where the state of your crops, your success in hunting, and the health of your children were all seen as direct blessings, or curses, from specific divine entities. It certainly adds a new layer of pressure to planting season, doesn't it? A quirky or fringe tidbit you might learn is that worshippers of Tlazolteotl would confess their transgressions, including sexual ones, to her priests, believing that she could eat or absorb their sins, cleansing them for a fresh start. This ritual confession, often accompanied by penance, was seen as a way to purify oneself, symbolically allowing for new growth and fertility. It's like a cosmic vacuum cleaner for your conscience, ready to suck up all your regrettable decisions and leave you sparkling clean. Historians still argue whether this confessional practice was widespread among all social classes, or primarily limited to specific devotees, and how deeply it impacted daily moral behavior outside of ritual contexts. You observe the meticulous attention paid to agricultural cycles, recognizing that human fertility rites were often performed in conjunction with the planting and harvesting seasons. This wasn't just a happy coincidence. It was a deeply held belief that the generative power of humans could influence the generative power of the earth. You might see couples participating in dances that became increasingly suggestive, mirroring the growth of plants from seed to full bloom, all as a prayer for the fields. Consider the offerings made to these fertility gods. These could range from precious jade and feathers to blood sacrifices, emphasizing the profound importance of these deities. But even beyond grand temple rituals, daily life was infused with smaller acts of devotion aimed at fertility. A woman desiring a child might place a small clay figurine of a pregnant woman on her home altar, a personal plea to the goddesses. It's a testament to how deeply intertwined personal desires were with communal well-being and divine intervention. The symbolism surrounding these cults was rich and pervasive. Phallic symbols were not uncommon, representing male generative power, often depicted in small figurines or architectural elements. Similarly, voluptuous female figures, sometimes shown giving birth, clearly celebrated the power of the feminine and the miracle of creation. These were not considered obscene. They were sacred representations of life itself, understood within a religious framework that saw the human body and its functions as fundamentally holy. This integration of fertility cults into every aspect of life meant that the Aztecs had a remarkably open and practical approach to sexuality, seeing it as a powerful, divine force to be harnessed and respected. It underscores a societal understanding that human thriving was inextricably linked to cosmic order, and that through ritual and devotion, they could play an active role in maintaining that delicate balance. You find yourself wondering what it would be like to live in a world where every act of intimacy felt like a prayer for the very sustenance of life. From the life-affirming rituals of fertility cults, you now confront one of the most enigmatic and, to modern eyes, shocking aspects of Aztec religious practice: human sacrifice, and how it sometimes carried profound, unsettling sexual symbolism. This wasn't merely about death. It was about cosmic sustenance, regeneration, and a dark, paradoxical mirroring of life-giving forces. You're delving into the heart of a belief system where blood nourished the gods, and even sacrifice could have erotic undertones. You might witness a solemn procession ascending the steps of a great temple, leading to the sacrificial stone. While most human sacrifices were primarily understood as offerings to the sun god Huitzilopochtli or the rain god Tlaloc, ensuring the cosmos continued its cycle, this mainstream historical fact that some sacrificial rituals, particularly those associated with fertility deities like Siptotec or Tlazolteotl, contained unsettlingly erotic or regenerative symbolism, reveals a deeper layer of meaning. For example, the flaying of victims in rituals for Sheep Totec, the flayed lord, symbolized the shedding of old skin for new growth, akin to the earth shedding its dry husk for new vegetation. This grotesque act was paradoxically linked to agricultural fertility and renewal. It's like a macabre gardening technique, where instead of fertilizer you use, well, you get the picture. A particularly disturbing, yet historically documented, detail you might uncover is that in some rites dedicated to fertility goddesses, the sacrifice was less about destruction and more about a forced, ritualistic union with the divine. For instance, the victim, especially a female, might be ritually adorned as the goddess herself, and their death seen as a symbolic culmination of a divine marriage or an act of self-sacrifice that fueled the earth's regenerative power. It's a chilling thought, turning death into a perverse form of sacred intimacy. Historians still argue whether the perceived erotic undertones were truly understood as such by the Aztecs, or if these interpretations are largely projections from European chroniclers who struggle to categorize indigenous religious practices. You observe the profound belief in Teotl, a divine sacred force that permeated all things, including human blood and hearts. When a sacrifice occurred, it was seen as returning this concentrated Teotl to the gods, thus nourishing them and ensuring their continued benevolent actions, such as bringing rain or making the corn grow. The life force was simply transferred, not extinguished, in a cosmic economy of energy. You realize the immense spiritual gravity of these acts, far removed from simple brutality. Consider the role of the priests, meticulously performing these rituals with precision. Their actions were not impulsive but highly choreographed, following ancient prophecies and calendrical alignments. The victim, though terrified, was often prepared ritually, sometimes even revered, as they became the living embodiment of the deity being honored. This transformed them from mere human to divine conduit, making their ultimate act a supreme gift to the cosmos. This complex understanding of human sacrifice, particularly its connections to fertility and regeneration, shows a profound and often unsettling integration of life, death, and sexuality in the Aztec worldview. It highlights a cycle of existence where endings were always beginnings, and where the most extreme acts could be imbued with the deepest spiritual meaning. You're left with a powerful, unsettling image of a civilization that saw the ultimate surrender of life as a profound contribution to the ongoing, fertile dance of the universe. Moving from the intense gravity of human sacrifice, you now enter a realm that, while still ritualized, touches more directly on human intimacy, the notion of sacred prostitution. This wasn't about transactional sex in the modern sense. It was about ritualized acts of intimacy, performed in a religious context, believed to foster divine connection and promote fertility. You're observing a practice where the human body and its sensual capabilities were seen as instruments for interacting with the sacred. You might hear accounts of women, particularly during festivals dedicated to fertility goddesses like Quetzalcoatl, who would engage in sexual acts as part of the public or semi-public rituals. This mainstream historical fact that some Aztec religious ceremonies involved ritualized sexual acts, which early Spanish chroniclers often sensationalized as sacred prostitution or idolatrous fornication, was integral to the belief system surrounding agricultural and human fertility. It's like your modern-day harvest festival, but instead of just apple bobbing, there might be symbolic, or even actual, acts of procreation to encourage the crops. No, your local church probably wouldn't approve, but for the Aztecs, it made perfect cosmic sense. A particularly intriguing detail you might encounter is the idea that some of these acts weren't just about physical union, but about the symbolic merging of human and divine energies. The participants might be seen as embodying the gods themselves for the duration of the ritual, with their intimacy becoming a conduit for divine power to flow into the world. It's like a spiritual dance, where the climax isn't just personal but cosmic. Historians still argue whether these ritual acts were always consensual for all participants, or if social pressures and religious fervour blurred the lines of individual agency in certain contexts. You observe that these practices were highly specific to certain deities and festivals, not a daily occurrence or a casual offering. The individuals involved were often participants in a cult, dedicated to the specific god, and their actions were understood within a deep religious framework. This wasn't a free-for-all. It was a structured ritual with profound spiritual intent, far removed from what we might understand as commercial sex work. Consider the role of garments and adornments during these rituals. Participants might wear specific clothing, paint their bodies, or carry sacred objects that symbolized the deity or the ritual's purpose. This enhanced the spiritual atmosphere, transforming the individuals from ordinary people into temporary vessels for divine power. You see how every element, from the physical act to the visual presentation, contributed to the overall sacred meaning. This concept of sacred prostitution, while confronting to modern sensibilities, highlights the Aztec belief that sexuality was a powerful, fundamental force of creation, intimately connected to the divine. It wasn't something to be hidden or ashamed of, but a potent energy that could be ritually directed to ensure the prosperity of the community, the bounty of the earth, and the favour of the gods. You find yourself reflecting on how different a society's relationship with intimacy can be when it's viewed through a lens of cosmic significance rather than moral judgment. Stepping away from the potentially public and ritualized intimacies, you now approach a more formal, yet equally dedicated aspect of Aztec religious life, the institution of temple maidens, women consecrated to specific deities and tasked with fulfilling crucial ritual duties. These weren't simply worshippers, they were integral components of the religious machinery, their lives often defined by service, discipline, and specific roles within the temple complexes. You're looking at a form of spiritual devotion that shaped entire female lives. You might observe young women, perhaps as early as their preteen years, being dedicated to the service of a particular god or goddess, such as Quetzalcoatl, the Earth Mother, or Xochitl, the goddess of flowers and beauty. This mainstream historical fact that young women, often from noble families, were dedicated as temple maidens or priestesses to serve various Aztec deities, performing duties like weaving, sweeping, and preparing ritual offerings meant a life fundamentally different from that of other women. Their days were structured around devotion, ensuring the smooth functioning of religious rites and the maintenance of sacred spaces. It's a bit like joining a highly exclusive, perpetually busy spiritual sorority, where your daily chores involve offerings to deities rather than tidying up a dorm. A particularly fascinating detail you might uncover is that while these maidens lived highly disciplined lives, often within the temple precincts, their service wasn't necessarily lifelong or celibate in the Christian monastic sense. For some, their time at the temple was a period of intense spiritual training, after which they might return to their communities to marry and have families, bringing their acquired spiritual knowledge with them. It's like a spiritual gap year, after which you rejoin society, but now with a direct line to the divine. Historians still argue whether all temple maidens were expected to remain virgins during their service, or if specific roles or deities might have allowed for ritualized sexual expressions that were distinct from typical marital practices. You observe their meticulous duties, weaving elaborate cloaks for idols, preparing ritual meals, sweeping the temple floors with ceremonial brooms, or participating in complex dances and songs dedicated to the gods. Every action was infused with spiritual meaning, contributing to the balance of the cosmos and the appeasement of the deities. You see the deep reverence with which they approached their tasks, understanding their vital role in maintaining the spiritual health of the empire. Consider the dedication involved. These young women often came from families who sought spiritual merit or divine favor through their daughters' service. For the maidens themselves, it was a path to honor, prestige, and a direct connection to the divine. Their lives, though perhaps austere, were filled with purpose and the profound satisfaction of serving something greater than themselves. It offers a powerful example of female agency channeled through religious devotion. This institution of temple maidens highlights the multifaceted roles women played in Aztec society, extending far beyond domestic life into the spiritual and ceremonial spheres. Their consecrated lives ensured the continuity of religious practice, the appeasement of the gods, and the spiritual well-being of the entire community. It underscores a societal recognition of the profound spiritual capacity of women, utilizing their dedication and labor for the highest religious purposes. Moving from the dedicated lives of temple maidens, you now consider the very foundation of Aztec society, their marriage customs, which were primarily arranged, politically motivated, and focused intensely on lineage. You're stepping into a system where personal romantic love, while perhaps present, took a distinct back seat to the pragmatic needs of family alliance, social status, and the continuity of the lineage. It's less about a love story and more about a strategic merger. You might observe a meticulous negotiation between two families, perhaps involving emissaries carrying gifts, carefully discussing the compatibility of their children and the benefits of their union. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec marriages were typically arranged by families, often with the help of matchmakers, to forge alliances, consolidate wealth, or elevate social standing, underscores their pragmatic nature. It was like a high-stakes corporate acquisition, but with humans ensuring the best possible outcome for both families involved. No awkward dinner dates required, just a careful calculation of benefits. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is that the age of marriage could vary significantly, but it wasn't uncommon for girls to be married in their mid to late teens, while men might wait until their early 20s. This often meant a slight age gap, perhaps influencing the power dynamics within the new household. It's like graduating from high school and immediately stepping into a management position, complete with a new family to oversee. Historians still argue whether arranged marriages in Aztec society generally led to stable and content unions over time, or if personal frustrations and desires often festered beneath the surface of societal expectation. You observe the role of the Cihuatlatolli, or female elders, who were often central to the matchmaking process. Their wisdom and understanding of family dynamics were crucial in selecting appropriate partners, ensuring not just a good match, but also social harmony. You see how communal input and experienced guidance were prioritized, minimizing individual risks and maximizing collective benefits. It highlights a system where wisdom from the older generation was genuinely valued. Consider the wedding ceremony itself. It was often a modest affair, certainly not the grand public spectacle of some European weddings. The bride might be carried on the back of an elderly woman to the groom's home, symbolizing her departure from her family and integration into his. A key ritual involved tying the corner of the groom's cloak to the bride's huipili tunic, symbolizing their unbreakable bond. It's a beautifully simple gesture, yet loaded with profound commitment. Children were the paramount goal of most marriages, seen as essential for the continuity of the family and the strength of the empire. Barrenness could be grounds for divorce, highlighting the immense societal pressure to procreate. However, the pragmatic nature of these unions meant that if a marriage wasn't working out, divorce was possible, which we'll delve into later. The emphasis was always on ensuring productive, stable households that contributed to the larger societal fabric. This structured approach to marriage, while lacking the romantic idealism of some cultures, provided a robust framework for social stability and demographic growth. It ensured that families were strengthened, alliances forged, and the future of the Aztec state secured through carefully planned unions. You realize that even without grand romantic gestures, these marriages formed the indispensable bedrock of one of history's most powerful empires. From the pragmatic foundations of Aztec marriage customs, you now ascend to the upper echelons of society to understand polygamy's presence, particularly among the elite. This wasn't a free-for-all. It was a carefully structured practice, primarily serving as a marker of high status, offering significant economic benefits and strengthening intricate social networks. You're observing how multiple wives became a powerful tool for consolidating influence and managing wealth in the Aztec Empire. You might envision a powerful Tlatoani ruler or a high-ranking nobleman whose household boasts not just one wife, but several, each potentially from a different influential family. This mainstream historical fact that polygamy, specifically polygyny, one man with multiple wives, was a recognized and common practice among the Aztec nobility and wealthy merchants, reflected and reinforced their elevated social standing. It was like collecting very strategic, very personal trophies, each one symbolizing a successful alliance or a new source of labor and lineage. More wives meant more prestige, more hands for complex domestic production, and more children to extend the family's influence. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is that while the primary wife, or chief wife, held a position of considerable authority and conducted major household affairs, the junior wives often contributed significantly to the economic output of the household, through weaving, crafting, or managing various enterprises. They weren't just decorative, they were vital economic partners. It's like running a highly efficient, multi-branch family corporation, where each co-CEO brings their unique skills to the table. Historians still argue whether the presence of multiple wives always led to harmonious households, or if competition for the husband's favor and resources often created significant interpersonal tension among the co-wives. You observe that the acquisition of multiple wives was often a direct consequence of a man's success in warfare or trade. A powerful warrior might be given wives as tribute, or a wealthy merchant might marry daughters from various trading families to solidify his network. You see how marriage, in this context, was an extension of political and economic strategy, securing alliances and expanding influence across different social strata and geographic regions. Consider the children born from these polygamous unions. They were all considered legitimate, and their mothers were respected members of the household. The children would contribute to the family's labor force, and further extend its lineage, creating a robust and expansive kinship network. This expansion of family was crucial for maintaining the social and economic power of the elite over generations. It's a pragmatic approach to family building, maximizing both social capital and future labor. This structured form of polygamy among the Aztec elite highlights how intimate relationships could be leveraged for broader societal and political ends. It wasn't a random indulgence, but a calculated strategy that reinforced hierarchy, managed resources, and ensured the continuity of powerful lineages. You realize that for the Aztec nobility, personal life was deeply intertwined with the machinations of power, making even marital arrangements a significant act of statecraft. Stepping away from the specific dynamics of polygamy, you now turn your attention to the broader societal framework of gender roles in Aztec society, noting how they were distinct yet remarkably complementary, defining expectations for both men and women. This wasn't a realm of strict oppression for one gender, but rather a system where both male and female contributions were seen as vital and interdependent, operating within clearly defined, yet respected, spheres. You're observing a meticulously organized society where everyone knew their place and understood its importance. You might witness men engaged in warfare, hunting, and agricultural labor, while women are busy weaving textiles, preparing food, and managing the household. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec society had clearly defined gender roles, with men primarily engaged in public spheres like warfare, politics, and large-scale agriculture, and women dominating the domestic sphere, craft production, especially weaving, and market trade, meant a distinct division of labor. However, unlike some European societies, women's work was highly valued and recognized as crucial to the economic and social well-being of the family and the empire. It's like a complex, well-oiled machine where every gear, regardless of size, is absolutely essential for the machine to run. No one was just the little woman when she was producing the very cloaks that paid the taxes. A particularly illuminating detail you might uncover is that while men achieved status through warfare and public office, women gained immense prestige through their skill in weaving and their success in childbirth. A woman who bore many children, particularly sons, was highly honored, and a master weaver could create intricate textiles that were considered valuable tribute items. It's like having parallel ladders to success, one for battle honors and another for domestic prowess, both equally celebrated. Historians still argue whether the perceived complementarity of gender roles truly translated into equal power and agency for women in all aspects of Aztec life, or if male dominance in the political and religious hierarchies ultimately gave men greater overall authority. You observe women participating actively in the bustling marketplaces, controlling the distribution of goods, and often managing family finances. Their economic agency was considerable, far from being confined solely to the home. They were not just consumers, they were vital producers and traders, driving a significant portion of the Aztec economy. You see their confident movements, their sharp haggling skills, and realize that power didn't just reside in the warrior class. Consider the symbolic parallels between male and female roles. Men's roles were often associated with the sun, the sky, and warfare, while women's roles were linked to the earth, water, and fertility. These weren't seen as superior or inferior, but as complementary forces necessary for cosmic balance. The act of giving birth was often equated with the male act of capturing a warrior in battle, both considered acts of profound creation and courage. It's a beautifully intricate way of viewing the world, where both genders were heroes in their own right. This distinct yet complementary division of gender roles allowed Aztec society to function with remarkable efficiency and cohesion. Both men and women had clear expectations and responsibilities, and both genders were honored for their unique contributions to the family and the empire. It offers a powerful reminder that gender structures can take many forms, and that a separation of spheres does not necessarily equate to a devaluation of one gender's contributions. From the defined spheres of gender roles, you now move to a daily practice that was both mundane and deeply symbolic: bathing rituals. For the Aztecs, cleanliness was far more than mere hygiene. It was intricately linked to spiritual purity, social custom, and even preparation for intimate encounters. You're witnessing a culture where a refreshing dip was also a profound act of spiritual cleansing. You might observe families regularly visiting temazcals, traditional steam baths made of adobe or stone, to cleanse themselves with water and herbs. This mainstream historical fact that regular bathing in rivers, lakes, or specialized steam baths, temazcals, was a widespread and integral part of Aztec daily life. Serving both hygienic and ritualistic purposes meant that Aztecs were remarkably clean compared to many contemporary Europeans. It's like having a community spa at your disposal every single day, ready to wash away not just dirt, but also the grime of daily worries. You can almost feel the invigorating steam and the gentle scent of herbs. A particularly charming detail you might uncover is that temazcals were often associated with Tochi, our grandmother, the earth goddess, and Cihuateotl, goddesses of childbirth and mothers who died in labor. Entering the temazcal was akin to re-entering the womb of the earth, emerging purified and revitalized. It's like a prenatal spa treatment for everyone, promising rebirth with every soak. Historians still argue whether the temazcal was primarily a hygienic practice that evolved spiritual significance, or if its spiritual function was inherent from its very inception, with cleanliness being a secondary benefit. You observe couples, both married and unmarried, using temazcals together, sometimes as a prelude to intimacy or as a way to relax and connect. The warmth and steam would soften the body, relax the mind, and prepare individuals for physical closeness. It highlights a societal comfort with shared, natural spaces for cleansing and social interaction, far removed from any sense of prudishness. You see a lack of self-consciousness that might surprise you, a simple acceptance of the human form in a natural setting. Consider the various purposes of these baths. Beyond daily hygiene, temazcals were used for purification rituals after battles, during childbirth, where the steam provided relief and was believed to aid delivery, and even as a form of healing for various ailments. Priests and healers would often guide these ritual baths, incorporating medicinal herbs and incantations to maximize their spiritual and physical benefits. It's a versatile tool, serving as both a bathroom and a spiritual sanctuary. This pervasive culture of bathing underscores a deep respect for the body and a holistic understanding of well-being. Cleanliness was seen as fundamental, not just for health, but for maintaining spiritual purity and social decorum. It meant that encounters, including intimate ones, were approached with a sense of freshness and reverence for the body, a stark contrast to the less sanitary conditions prevalent in many other historical civilizations. You appreciate the simple, profound wisdom in recognizing that a clean body often leads to a clear mind and a more open spirit. From the cleansing waters of bathing rituals, you now delve into a more sensitive and complex area of Aztec life: their views on homosexuality. Unlike the blanket condemnations found in many European societies, the Aztec stance was nuanced, sometimes accepting, sometimes condemned, and often intertwined with specific social roles or religious contexts. You're entering a moral landscape that wasn't a simple binary. You might hear whispers and fragmented accounts from early Spanish chroniclers, who, with their own ingrained biases, often portrayed any non-heteronormative behavior as inherently evil. However, historical and anthropological evidence suggests a more complex reality. This mainstream historical fact that while male same-sex sexual acts were generally condemned, particularly if they involved a passive male partner or were seen as effeminate, other forms of same-sex relations or gender fluidity might have existed or been interpreted differently within specific social or religious contexts, highlights the varying degrees of acceptance and taboo. It's like a very specific rulebook, where some actions were definitely off-limits, but others had footnotes and exceptions. You sense the tension between the native understanding and the imposed foreign morality. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is the historical ambiguity surrounding specific roles that could be interpreted as gender variant, somewhat akin to the two-spirit individuals in North American indigenous cultures, though direct Aztec parallels are less clearly defined in existing records. Some scholars suggest certain priestly roles or ritual performers might have embodied elements that transcended strict gender norms, and their sexual lives might have been viewed differently. It's like a historical riddle, where the answers are hidden behind layers of cultural suppression and linguistic interpretation. Historians still argue whether there were truly accepted roles for gender variant or homosexual individuals within Aztec society prior to the Spanish conquest, or if the Spanish accounts primarily reflect their own judgmental interpretations of unfamiliar practices. You observe that the primary concern regarding male homosexuality for the Aztecs often revolved around notions of masculinity, military prowess, and the imperative of procreation. A man who assumed a feminine role in a sexual act was often seen as undermining his masculine identity, which was deeply tied to his role as a warrior and a provider. This was particularly true for the active partner, who was seen as feminizing the other. You see how deeply ingrained these societal expectations were, linking personal conduct to military strength and communal survival. Consider the severe punishments recorded for some forms of male homosexuality, particularly those involving public or repeated transgressions, which could include execution. This indicates a strong societal disapproval of certain acts. However, it's crucial to remember that these accounts come largely from Spanish sources, which might have exaggerated the severity or universality of such punishments due to their own extreme homophobia. The Aztec legal system, while strict, was also highly contextual. This complex and often contradictory picture of Aztec views on homosexuality reveals a society struggling to reconcile various facets of human behavior with their deeply held beliefs about cosmic order and societal roles. While certainly not as universally accepting as some idealized interpretations might suggest, it also wasn't a monolithic condemnation. It highlights how different cultures draw their lines, and how profoundly those lines can shift based on values centered on procreation, masculinity, and ritual purity, rather than purely individual expression. From the complex perspectives on homosexuality, you now move to another area where Aztec society drew a clear and often harsh line: adultery laws. These were remarkably strict, carrying severe penalties, because maintaining marital fidelity was seen as crucial for upholding social order, ensuring legitimate lineage, and preventing disruptive conflicts within families and clans. You're stepping into a legal system where a broken vow could mean a broken life. You might hear a solemn pronouncement in the marketplace, announcing the punishment for a detected adulterer. This mainstream historical fact that adultery was considered a serious crime in Aztec society, punishable by severe penalties including stoning, strangulation, or even death, particularly if committed by a noblewoman or with a high-ranking individual, underscores the critical importance placed on marital fidelity. It's like a zero-tolerance policy for wandering eyes, where the consequences were definitely not just a stern talking to. You feel a chill in the air, a stark reminder of the gravity of such transgressions. A particularly grim detail you might uncover is that the punishment for adultery was often applied equally to both the man and the woman involved, highlighting a degree of gender parity in legal consequences. Unlike some European systems where women often bore the brunt of the blame, however, the specific method of execution could vary by social status and local custom. It's like a grim game of 2 for 1, ensuring that both parties understood the severe societal disapproval. Historians still argue whether the frequency of these harsh punishments was truly high in practice, or if the severe laws primarily served as a powerful deterrent, with actual executions being less common than the laws might suggest. You observe that the primary concern behind these strict laws wasn't just individual morality, but the potential for social chaos. Adultery could destabilize families, create inheritance disputes, and undermine the intricate web of alliances forged through arranged marriages. The law sought to protect the purity of lineage and the stability of the household, which was seen as fundamental to the strength of the empire. You see how deeply personal acts were intertwined with the very fabric of the state. Consider the role of public shaming. Even if the ultimate punishment wasn't death, the public exposure of an adulterous affair brought immense disgrace upon both individuals and their families. This social stigma could be a lifelong burden, affecting their standing in the community and the marriage prospects of their children. It's a powerful reminder that in closely knit societies, reputation is often as valuable, or more so, than life itself. This stringent enforcement of adultery laws reveals a society deeply invested in order and control, where the stability of the family unit was paramount. It stands in stark contrast to the more relaxed approaches to premarital sexuality, or even polygamy among the elite, demonstrating that while some forms of intimacy were fluid, others were rigidly policed for the sake of societal cohesion. You realize the Aztecs had a very clear understanding of which sexual acts fortified their empire, and which ones threatened to unravel it. From the strictures of adultery laws, you now navigate to a different facet of Aztec society, the recognized and regulated institution of prostitution. This wasn't a hidden vice, it was a distinct social stratum, with specific cultural contexts and even a patron deity, highlighting a remarkably pragmatic approach to certain forms of sexual activity. You're examining a system where certain women held a recognized, albeit distinct, social status for their profession. You might learn about the ahuyanime, a Nahuatl term that loosely translates to pleasure women or joyful women who were professional courtesans or prostitutes. This mainstream historical fact that a class of professional women existed in Aztec society, who engaged in sexual services for payment or goods, and were generally recognized, though perhaps not highly esteemed, indicates a level of societal regulation rather than outright condemnation. They were often distinguishable by their elaborate hairstyles, colourful clothing, and sometimes by chewing tsickli chicle, or chewing gum, in public, a subtle signal of their profession. It's like a very particular dress code, letting everyone know exactly who you are and what you do, without needing a billboard. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is that the ahuyanime were sometimes associated with Xochiquetzal, the goddess of flowers, beauty, pleasure, and sexual love. While not priests, their profession existed under the broader umbrella of pleasure and fertility, suggesting a complex, even paradoxical relationship with the divine. It's like having a patron saint for your nightlife, offering a layer of spiritual context to what might otherwise be seen as purely secular. Historians still argue whether the ahuyanime held a more liminal or subversive social position, or if their regulated existence actually provided a degree of economic independence and autonomy not available to all Aztec women. You observe that these women often frequented marketplaces, public baths, and festivals, places where social interaction was common. They served a diverse clientele, from warriors to merchants, offering companionship and sexual services. While they were not fully integrated into conventional family structures, they often lived communally in specific areas of cities or towns, forming their own social networks. You see a pragmatic societal acceptance, providing a regulated outlet for desires that might otherwise disrupt the strict norms of marriage. Consider the contrast between the ahuyanime and married women. Married women were expected to be chaste and dedicated to their families, while the ahuyanime operated outside these strictures. This distinction helped maintain the purity of lineage within the official marital system. Yet, the existence of the ahuyanime suggests that the Aztecs, for all their strict laws on adultery, understood the realities of human desire and provided a structured means for its expression. It's a system designed to keep the peace and manage inherent human complexities. This regulated form of prostitution reveals a sophisticated, albeit pragmatic, understanding of social dynamics within the Aztec Empire. It highlights a society that, while valuing strict marital fidelity, also recognized the need for outlets beyond conventional marriage, providing a defined space for diverse sexual services. It underscores a social order that sought to manage human behavior through categorization and regulation, rather than universal prohibition. From the regulated world of Aztec prostitution, you now delve into a more universal and foundational aspect of society: sexual education. For the Aztecs, this wasn't a hushed, awkward conversation. It was a continuous, communal process, deeply integrated into familial guidance and broader community expectations. You're stepping into a system where knowledge about intimacy was transmitted openly, often through practical lessons and moral teachings, rather than through formal, segregated instruction. You might observe a grandmother patiently instructing a young girl on the proper care of her body, the intricacies of weaving, and the responsibilities of future motherhood, with veiled references to marital duties. This mainstream historical fact that sexual education in Aztec society was primarily informal, delivered through familial guidance, especially from mothers, aunts, and grandmothers to girls, and fathers, uncles to boys, and embedded within broader moral and social teachings, meant that children gradually absorbed knowledge about intimacy as they matured. It's like learning life lessons through osmosis, where every interaction is a teaching moment, subtly preparing you for adulthood. You feel the constant, gentle presence of guiding hands. A particularly empathetic detail you might uncover is that young boys, upon reaching a certain age, would often be sent to communal schools or temples, Telpakali or Karmakak, where they would learn about their roles as warriors, citizens, and future husbands. While direct sexual instruction might have been limited, the emphasis on discipline, responsibility, and the sacredness of family implicitly shaped their understanding of intimate relationships. It's like a very holistic boarding school, where lessons in weaponry come hand in hand with lessons in personal conduct. Historians still argue whether the level of explicit sexual detail conveyed in these informal lessons varied significantly across social classes, or if core information was universally shared, adapted only for specific roles. You observe the role of storytelling. Many Aztec myths and legends contain narratives about creation, fertility, and the interactions between gods and humans, often with implicit or explicit sexual themes. These stories, shared around the hearth or during festivals, provided a cultural framework for understanding desire, procreation, and the consequences of actions. You see how entertainment and moral instruction were seamlessly blended, making learning an engaging and memorable experience. Consider the practical demonstrations. While not directly sexual, lessons about caring for children, preparing food, or managing a household taught boys and girls about their complementary roles within a family unit, laying the groundwork for a stable partnership. Girls learned about childbirth through assisting older women, and boys learned about providing and protecting. This hands-on approach ensured that theoretical knowledge was grounded in practical realities. It's a bit like learning to drive by actually getting behind the wheel on day one. This integrated approach to sexual education meant that young Aztecs grew up with a relatively open and natural understanding of their bodies and desires. It wasn't a source of shame or confusion, but a vital aspect of life, understood within the context of communal well-being and divine purpose. It offered a remarkably healthy and uninhibited way of preparing the next generation for the responsibilities and joys of intimacy, ensuring the continuity of both family and empire. From the communal lessons of sexual education, you now explore a more private and pragmatic aspect of Aztec life, their knowledge of contraception, particularly through herbal means and traditional birth control methods. This reveals a society that, despite its emphasis on procreation, also possess the wisdom and means to manage family size and plan for desired outcomes. You're looking at a subtle yet significant power wielded by individuals, especially women, over their own reproductive destinies. You might learn about certain plants and herbs known to Aztec healers, tlamatinimae or tisitol, that were believed to have contraceptive properties. This mainstream historical fact that indigenous peoples in Mesoamerica, including the Aztecs, possessed extensive knowledge of medicinal plants, some of which were used for fertility regulation, inducing abortion, or preventing conception, highlights a sophisticated understanding of botany and human physiology. It's like having a natural pharmacy at your fingertips, offering discreet solutions for family planning long before modern medicine. You can almost smell the earthy scent of powerful herbs. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is the use of substances like the root of the Cihuapatli plant, often identified as Montanoa tomentosa, which was said to have abortifacient properties, or other plants believed to prevent conception. While the efficacy might have varied, their knowledge indicates a deliberate effort to control reproduction when desired. It's like a very early form of biohacking, using nature's secrets to influence personal outcomes. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of these contraceptive methods was primarily a means of spacing births for maternal and child health, or if it also reflected a desire for individual sexual freedom divorced from immediate procreation. You observe that this knowledge was likely passed down primarily through female lineage, from mothers to daughters, and within the specialized circles of healers and midwives. These methods were likely used discreetly, as open defiance of procreative expectations might have been frowned upon, but the existence of the knowledge itself points to agency. You see a quiet power being exercised, allowing women a degree of control over their bodies even in a society that highly valued childbirth. Consider the social contexts for using such methods. Perhaps a woman already had many children and needed to space out births for her own health or the well-being of existing offspring. Or perhaps a young, unmarried woman sought to avoid pregnancy during a period of premarital exploration. While the primary societal expectation was for procreation within marriage, the reality of individual circumstances often necessitated practical solutions. It reflects a nuanced approach to life, balancing societal norms with personal needs. This understanding of herbal contraception reveals a practical and knowledgeable aspect of Aztec life, providing individuals with tools to manage their reproductive lives. It underscores a subtle layer of individual agency, particularly for women, within a society that otherwise emphasized communal obligations and procreative duties. You realize that even in an empire built on continuity and expansion, there was space for personal choice and the quiet wisdom of traditional medicine. Transitioning from the quiet wisdom of contraception, you now examine a cornerstone of Aztec communal life, child-rearing. This was rarely the solitary burden of individual parents. Instead, it was a collective endeavor, characterized by a blend of nurturing, firm discipline, and continuous moral lessons aimed at shaping children into responsible members of society. You're observing a system designed to integrate every young individual seamlessly into the intricate social fabric. You might witness an extended family, including grandparents, aunts, and uncles, actively participating in guiding a child's development, offering instruction and support. This mainstream historical fact that child rearing in Aztec society was a communal responsibility, with extended family and the wider community playing significant roles in a child's upbringing, and education meant that children were constantly surrounded by a network of care and guidance. It's like having an entire village as your personal parenting committee, ensuring no child ever truly fell through the cracks. You feel the constant, watchful presence of many caring eyes. A particularly insightful detail you might uncover is the emphasis on moral education from a very young age. Children were taught proper etiquette, respect for elders, diligence in chores, and the importance of self-control through proverbs, Huhi Utla Tolli, stories, and gentle correction. While physical punishment was not unheard of, it was generally considered a last resort. Shame and public admonishment were often preferred methods for correcting misbehavior. It's like a continuous life coaching program, where every lesson aims to mold you into a virtuous citizen, often using public opinion as a powerful motivator. Historians still argue whether the perceived strictness of Aztec child-rearing methods led to overly compliant adults, or if it fostered a deep sense of social responsibility and personal discipline that benefited the entire community. You observe the gendered nature of upbringing. Boys were taught by their fathers and uncles about hunting, farming, and warfare, preparing them for their roles as providers and protectors. Girls learned from their mothers and aunts about weaving, cooking, and household management, preparing them for their domestic and economic contributions. These were not just practical skills, but moral lessons about diligence and the importance of their future roles. You see how early training laid the groundwork for clearly defined, yet equally valued, adult responsibilities. Consider the institutions of formal education, the Telpokali, House of Youth, for commoners and the Karmakak for nobles, where children often began attending in their early teens. Here, moral instruction, religious teachings, and practical skills specific to their social class were reinforced. It was at these schools that the lessons learnt at home were expanded upon, solidifying their identity as Aztecs and their place within the empire. It's a bit like a combined civic and vocational training program, preparing you for life with a capital L. This deeply communal and morally grounded approach to child-rearing aimed to produce individuals who were not only skilled and productive, but also virtuous and loyal to their community and their gods. It fostered a strong sense of collective identity and responsibility, ensuring the continuity of Aztec traditions and the stability of the empire. You realize that a society's future truly lies in the hands of its children, and the Aztecs spared no effort in shaping those hands with care and purpose. Building on the foundation of communal child-rearing, you now witness the pivotal moments of puberty rites, the transition ceremonies that formally marked an individual's entry into adulthood and its accompanying societal responsibilities. These weren't just birthdays. They were often elaborate, sometimes arduous, rituals designed to transform children into responsible members of their gender, ready to contribute to the empire. You're watching the symbolic shedding of childhood. You might observe a young Aztec boy, perhaps around the age of 15, undergoing a period of intense training at the Telpokali or Karmakak, where physical endurance, military drills, and spiritual discipline were paramount. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec puberty rites, particularly for boys, involved rigorous training and education in communal schools, marking their transition into warrior or priestly roles, and their full acceptance as adults forged strong bonds and instilled a deep sense of duty. It's like a very demanding boot camp, except instead of just push-ups, you're learning sacred songs and the proper way to wield an obsidian blade. You can almost feel the nervous energy, the anticipation of proving oneself. A particularly striking detail you might uncover is that for girls, while less publicly formalized than boys' military training, puberty was often marked by ceremonies focusing on domestic skills, weaving proficiency, and readiness for marriage and childbirth. A special ceremony might involve a girl's first weaving project, presented to her family, symbolizing her readiness to contribute economically to a household. It's like a debutante ball, but instead of fancy dresses, it's all about showcasing your thread-making prowess. Historians still argue whether the transition rites for girls were as universally structured and mandated as those for boys, or if they were more flexible and family-specific, reflecting women's diverse domestic roles. You observe that these rites often involved a period of fasting, seclusion, or strict behavioral guidelines. For boys, this might include exposure to pain or endurance tests designed to prepare them for the harsh realities of warfare. For girls, it might involve symbolic acts of purification or instruction on the sacredness of their bodies and their role in continuing the lineage. You see the deep cultural investment in ensuring that every young person understood the gravity and importance of their adult responsibilities. Consider the communal celebration that often followed the successful completion of these rites. The young adults, now recognized by the community, would participate in feasts, dances, and public gatherings, officially welcoming them into the ranks of full members. This communal affirmation reinforced their new status and solidified their connection to the tribe. It's a moment of immense pride, not just for the individual, but for the entire family and clan. These puberty rites were crucial for the social cohesion and perpetuation of Aztec society. They ensured that each generation was adequately prepared for its roles, understood its obligations, and was spiritually aligned with the values of the empire. It underscores a profound commitment to guided development, transforming childhood innocence into adult responsibility through a series of meaningful, often challenging experiences. Following the structured path of puberty rites, you now explore a different kind of inner world, dream interpretation. For the Aztecs, dreams were not random nocturnal wanderings but profound messages from the gods, ancestors, or even one's own soul, offering guidance, warnings, and insights, including those with powerful sexual symbolism. You're stepping into a realm where the subconscious was seen as a direct conduit to the divine. You might hear a troubled individual recounting a vivid dream to a Tlamatinim, wise person, or a priest, seeking elucidation for its hidden meaning. This mainstream historical fact that dreams were highly valued in Aztec society as sources of divine communication and were meticulously interpreted for guidance on personal decisions, warfare, and communal well-being meant that what happened in your sleep could profoundly influence your waking life. It's like having a personalized celestial messenger service, delivering cryptic but crucial memos while you snooze. You can almost feel the hushed reverence that accompanies such a recounting, knowing that vital truths might be revealed. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is that dreams featuring sexual acts, nudity, or erotic encounters were not necessarily dismissed as mere carnal urges. Instead, they were often interpreted symbolically, perhaps indicating a forthcoming blessing related to fertility, a warning about excessive indulgence, a connection to a specific deity of pleasure, or even a call to a particular sacred path. It's like a Freudian analysis session, but with far more feathers and fewer couches, and where your steamy dream might actually mean you're about to have a bumper crop. Historians still argue whether the interpretation of overtly sexual dreams consistently lean towards symbolic spiritual meanings, or if, in certain contexts, they were also acknowledged as natural expressions of human desire, without necessarily requiring deeper supernatural explanations. You observe the careful process of interpretation. The dream interpreter would consider the specific symbols present in the dream animals, colors, objects, locations, and contextualize them within the vast body of Aztec mythology, calendrical associations, and the individual's personal circumstances. There was no single dream dictionary. Rather, interpretation was a skilled art, requiring deep cultural and spiritual knowledge. You see how such a practice fosters introspection and a constant dialogue between the individual and the spiritual realm. Consider the impact of dream guidance on daily life. A significant dream might influence whether a merchant embarked on a journey, a warrior joined a specific raid, or a couple decided to marry. If a dream suggested a particular course of action, it was taken with extreme seriousness, indicating the profound trust placed in these nocturnal messages. It highlights a society that valued intuition and spiritual insight as much as, if not more than, purely rational calculation. This profound respect for dream interpretation reveals an Aztec worldview where the boundaries between the physical and spiritual realms were highly permeable. The night, far from being just a time for rest, was an active period of divine communication, offering a pathway to deeper understanding and harmonious living. You realize how much modern society might miss by dismissing dreams as fleeting neurological events rather than potent sources of wisdom and guidance from the universe itself. From the ephemeral insights of dream interpretation, you now turn to the tangible objects that held profound power and meaning, fetish objects. These weren't mere curiosities, they were items imbued with concentrated spiritual force, believed to offer protection, bring good fortune, or, in some compelling instances, carry potent phallic or erotic symbolism. You're examining the intersection of the material and the mystical, where everyday items could become conduits for profound energies, sometimes explicitly linked to procreation. You might hold a small, intricately carved stone figure, perhaps depicting a stylized phallus, or an animal like a rabbit, a symbol of fertility and drunkenness, remember. This mainstream historical fact that various Aztec cults and individuals utilized fetish objects, often small carvings or natural items, believed to house spirits or possess specific powers, with some explicitly featuring phallic or fertility symbolism, underscores a widespread belief in sympathetic magic and concentrated life force. It's like having a miniature, personal battery pack for cosmic juice, specifically designed to zap you with good luck in the bedroom or ensure your fields are overflowing. You can almost feel a faint hum of concentrated belief emanating from such an artifact. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is the use of tepitoten, small stone idols often inherited or kept in homes, which could sometimes include overtly sexual representations, serving as personal household deities or protective charms. These weren't for public display, but for intimate, familial reverence linked to household fertility and prosperity. It's like having a tiny, slightly risque garden gnome, but for your spiritual well-being and reproductive success. Historians still argue whether the presence of overtly phallic or sexual imagery on these fetishes was primarily about literal procreative power, or if it also served as a broader symbol of general abundance, vitality, and life force. You observe how these objects were cared for with reverence, often placed on household altars or carried as personal amulets. Their power was believed to derive from their connection to specific deities, or from the person who created or ritually imbued them with spiritual energy. You see the deep personal connection individuals had with these items far beyond mere possession. They were companions on the journey of life, conduits to divine favor, and tangible reminders of spiritual truths. Consider the diverse forms these fetishes could take. A small pouch filled with sacred herbs, a specially chosen stone, a piece of carved wood, or even an animal part like a jaguar claw could become a fetish, depending on its perceived connection to spiritual power. The power wasn't in the object's intrinsic value, but in the spirit it housed, or the intent with which it was used, especially for matters of fertility and sexual well-being. It's a holistic view where almost anything could become sacred, blurring the lines between the mundane and the divine. This reliance on fetish objects reveals an Aztec worldview where spiritual power was accessible and could be contained within material forms, including those explicitly linked to human sexuality and fertility. It provided individuals with tangible anchors for their prayers and beliefs, ensuring that the vital forces of creation were always within reach. You realize how much richer life must have been when so many objects were infused with such profound personal meaning. Moving beyond the tactile power of fetish objects, you now turn to the vibrant and pervasive realm of artistic expression, discovering how sexual themes were openly and powerfully depicted in various forms of Aztec art. These weren't hidden, titillating images. They were bold statements of profound spiritual beliefs, fertility prayers, and affirmations of life, etched into pottery, carved into stone, painted on codices, or molded into figurines. You're witnessing an artistic tradition where the raw force of procreation was celebrated, not concealed. You might encounter ceramic vessels adorned with figures engaged in intimate acts, or carved stone sculptures of deities with overt phallic or vulvar symbolism. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec art, across mediums like pottery, sculpture, and codices, frequently incorporated explicit sexual and reproductive imagery, often linked to fertility cults, creation myths, and the celebration of life, demonstrates a widespread societal comfort and reverence for the generative powers of the universe. It's like walking into an art gallery where every masterpiece is a vibrant, unabashed ode to how babies are made and how corn grows tall. You appreciate the directness, the lack of pretense in their artistic voice. A particularly striking detail you might observe is the common depiction of goddesses associated with fertility, childbirth, and sexual love, such as Tlazolteotl or Xochiquetzal, in forms that emphasize their procreative power, sometimes even showing them giving birth or adorned with symbols of fecundity. These images served as visual prayers, meant to invoke abundance, ensure the continuity of the lineage, and celebrate the fundamental act of creation. It's like a divine marketing campaign, promoting life and growth with every brushstroke. Historians still argue whether the level of anatomical detail or explicit sexual content in certain Aztec artworks was intended purely for ritual and religious purposes, or if it also served an aesthetic or even instructional function within the broader culture. You observe the meticulous craftsmanship involved, whether it was the delicate lines of a painted codex, a pre-Columbian book, the bold carvings on a temple facade, or the expressive forms of ceramic figurines. Aztec artists employed their skill to convey complex ideas about life, death, and regeneration. You see how art was not merely decorative but deeply purposeful, acting as a visual language to transmit knowledge and reinforce cultural values across generations. Consider the materials used: clay from the earth, stone from the mountains, pigments derived from plants and minerals. The very elements of nature were transformed by human hands into objects that celebrated nature's generative power, creating a profound connection between the art, the artist, and the sacred message. It's a testament to the idea that creativity itself was seen as a mirroring of divine creation, where human hands could, in their own way, bring forth powerful new forms. This open representation of sexuality in Aztec art stands in stark contrast to the often repressed and hidden sexual imagery found in many other historical cultures, especially those influenced by Abrahamic religions. For Aztec artists, the human body and its capacity for procreation were not subjects of shame or sin, but sources of wonder, power, and sacred beauty, deserving of artistic celebration. It offered a visual vocabulary for discussing fundamental aspects of existence, ensuring that the reverence for life and fertility remained at the forefront of communal consciousness. It's a powerful testament to a civilization that saw no need to hide the source of its very being. Transitioning from the static beauty of artistic expression, you now delve into a more dynamic and often paradoxical aspect of male identity: warrior sexuality. For the Aztec warrior, the path to martial prowess and spiritual readiness was often intertwined with specific sexual practices or, more often, strict self-control and ritual purity. You're entering a realm where intimacy could be a distraction, or its careful management a source of immense power. You might hear a veteran warrior advising younger recruits about the importance of abstinence before a major battle or a long campaign. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec warriors often practiced ritual sexual abstinence before warfare, believing it conserved vital energy, enhanced their spiritual purity, and increased their ferocity and focus in battle, highlights a widespread belief in the disciplined management of personal power. It's like a pre-game ritual for the ages, where instead of carb loading, you're energy hoarding for maximum combat effectiveness. You can almost feel the taut discipline, the quiet resolve in the air before a raid. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is that while abstinence was common for the warriors themselves, specific, ritualized sexual encounters involving captive women were sometimes part of victory celebrations or rites of passage, particularly for elite warriors. These were not casual acts, but deeply symbolic ones, asserting dominance and reinforcing the warrior's status and connection to the life and death cycles of warfare. It's a grim trophy presentation where the spoils include more than just material wealth. Historians still argue whether these ritualistic acts with captives were always non-consensual from the perspective of the captive, or if, in some extremely rare cases of long-term integration, a form of complex coerced acceptance could eventually develop within the Aztec societal framework. You observe the rigorous training that forged Aztec warriors. Their lives were dedicated to physical conditioning, mastery of weapons, and spiritual discipline. The management of sexual energy was seen as a part of this holistic preparation. Unleashed indiscriminately, it could be a weakness. Controlled and directed, it contributed to a warrior's inner strength and focus. You see how every aspect of life was geared towards creating effective soldiers for the empire. Consider the role of specific deities associated with warriors, like Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and sun. Devotion to these gods often involved strict adherence to a moral code, which included sexual conduct. A warrior's purity was not just for himself, but for the success of the entire military endeavor, as their collective spiritual state could influence the outcome of battle. It's like believing your individual actions on Saturday night could affect the national defense budget. This intertwining of warrior identity with specific sexual practices, predominantly abstinence, reveals a deep-seated belief in the power of self-control and ritual purity. For the Aztec warrior, true strength wasn't just about physical might, but about spiritual discipline and the careful management of one's vital life force. It underscores a powerful conviction that even the most intimate aspects of human existence could be channeled for the ultimate defense and expansion of the empire. Transitioning from the disciplined world of warrior sexuality, you now confront a harsher, undeniably brutal aspect of intertribal relations: conquest and rape. This isn't a comfortable topic, but understanding it is essential to grasping the full, often violent spectrum of intimate encounters that occurred during warfare and subjugation in the Aztec Empire. You're looking at situations where power was absolute, and human bodies became territories of conquest. You might hear chilling accounts, often from Spanish chronicles or indigenous testimonies recorded post-conquest, detailing the fate of women from conquered or raided territories. This mainstream historical fact that sexual violence, including rape, was a grim reality during Aztec warfare and conquest, often targeting women from defeated groups as spoils of war, reflects the brutal nature of ancient conflict. It was a tool of subjugation, a means of asserting dominance, and a profound act of dehumanization. You feel a cold dread, understanding the utter helplessness of those caught in such a brutal system. A particularly disturbing detail you might uncover is that while Aztec legal codes within the empire were strict about adultery and domestic fidelity, these rules often did not apply to women from outside the empire, especially those captured during hostilities. They were considered part of the spoils, and their bodies were subjected to the will of the victors. It's like a set of rules that applies inside the fence, but completely disappears once you step outside. Historians still argue whether instances of sexual violence were widespread and systematic policy during Aztec conquest, or if they were opportunistic acts committed by individual warriors, albeit within a broader context where the bodies of conquered peoples were considered legitimate spoils. You observe the profound psychological and physical trauma inflicted upon these women. Beyond the immediate violence, they often faced forced relocation, cultural assimilation, and the complete severing of ties with their original families and communities. While some might eventually be integrated into the victorious tribe, even becoming wives to their captors, the initial circumstances of their entry were often utterly coercive and brutal. You see the deep scars that such experiences would leave, enduring for generations. Consider the children born from such unions. While generally accepted into the conquering society, especially if their father was an Aztec warrior or noble, their mother's experiences highlight the complex and often tragic origins of new lineages. These children represented a fusion of conquered and conqueror, embodying the very process of Aztec expansion and assimilation. It speaks to a pragmatic drive for population growth and integration, even from the most violent beginnings. This examination of conquest and rape reveals the stark, brutal realities of power dynamics in the Aztec Empire's expansion. It highlights that even in a society with deeply ritualized and often reverent views of sexuality, the violence of warfare could override all other considerations, turning human bodies into symbols of victory and subjugation. It serves as a somber reminder of the enduring horrors of conflict, where the most fundamental human rights are often the first casualties. Emerging from the harsh realities of conquest, you now face the monumental and often devastating impact of post-conquest changes brought by European arrival. The Spanish conquistadors, fueled by their own rigid morality and religious fervor, systematically dismantled Aztec society, profoundly altering their sexual practices, gender roles, and the very fabric of their cultural understanding of intimacy. You're witnessing a violent collision of two vastly different worldviews, where centuries of established customs met an uncompromising, alien ideology. You might hear the fervent sermons of Franciscan friars, condemning traditional Aztec practices as pagan idolatry and sodomy, demanding conversion to strict Catholic doctrines. This mainstream historical fact that the Spanish conquest led to the aggressive suppression of indigenous sexual practices deemed immoral by Catholic doctrine, including polygamy, ritual sexuality, and diverse gender expressions like those of gender-variant individuals, profoundly disrupted Aztec social norms. It was like a cultural bulldozer, flattening a vibrant, complex landscape and attempting to replant it with a rigidly uniform garden. You feel the immense pressure, the deliberate erasure of unique ways of being. A particularly insidious detail you might uncover is how European diseases, inadvertently or intentionally introduced, decimated native populations, sometimes wiping out entire communities before direct military engagement. This catastrophic loss of life not only reduced tribal numbers, but also shattered social structures, kinship networks, and the oral transmission of traditional knowledge, including nuanced understandings of sexuality and gender. The sheer scale of death meant that many unique customs, including those related to intimacy, simply vanished with their last practitioners. It's like an entire library burning down, its irreplaceable contents lost forever, not just for the Aztecs, but for humanity. Historians still argue whether the demographic collapse due to disease alone was a greater agent of cultural destruction than the direct religious and social imposition by Spanish colonizers. You observe the relentless imposition of rigid European gender roles. Women, who in many Aztec communities held significant power, property, and economic autonomy, found their roles diminished and their influence severely curtailed under Spanish patriarchy. The emphasis shifted to a nuclear family model, male dominance, and the suppression of female economic and political authority. You see the systematic erosion of a balanced societal structure, replaced by a hierarchical model that stripped indigenous women of their traditional agency, including their control over their own bodies and reproductive choices. Consider the profound impact on traditional marriage customs and views on premarital sexuality. Where once there was a pragmatic acceptance of arranged marriages and a degree of premarital freedom, missionaries introduced concepts of sin, illegitimacy, and the indissolubility of Christian marriage. This led to increased social stigma for children born outside of new Catholic norms, pressure for lifelong monogamy even in unhappy unions, and the shaming of previously accepted sexual behaviors. You realize how profoundly personal lives were regulated and controlled by external forces, leading to widespread psychological distress and cultural dissonance. This period marked a profound and violent rupture, a complete overhaul of centuries of organic cultural development. The imposition of foreign norms, often backed by military force and religious coercion, forced indigenous peoples to adapt, resist, or succumb. While resilience and adaptation are powerful themes in post-conquest history, these changes fundamentally altered the intimate landscapes of Aztec lives, leaving a legacy of challenges that continue to resonate for indigenous communities to this day. It's a sobering reminder of the fragility of cultural identity in the face of overwhelming external pressure. Despite the devastating impacts of post-conquest changes, you now turn to a more fluid and less tangible aspect of Aztec social and spiritual life: ritual intoxication. This wasn't mere recreation. It was a deeply purposeful practice involving substances like pulque, an alcoholic beverage from agave, and certain hallucinogens, used to achieve altered states of consciousness for divination, spiritual communion, and specific ritualistic purposes, sometimes intertwined with sexual release. You're observing a path to the divine through mind-altering experiences. You might see priests or designated individuals consuming pulque during ceremonies dedicated to Mayawel, the goddess of Magui and fertility, or Paticatl, the god of medicine and pulque. This mainstream historical fact that Aztecs utilized fermented beverages like pulque and certain hallucinogenic plants, such as mushrooms, peyote, and morning glory seeds, in controlled ritual contexts to induce altered states for religious divination, healing, and spiritual communion, underscores a sophisticated understanding of psychotropic substances. It's like having a very specific set of keys to unlock different doors of perception, but only used for sacred purposes, not just to unwind after a long day of conquering. You can almost feel the disorienting, yet strangely enlightening, shift in consciousness. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is that while excessive drunkenness in daily life was generally condemned for commoners, ritual intoxication during specific festivals or rites could be permissible, even encouraged, for certain participants. In some fertility rites, the consumption of pulque might have lowered inhibitions, leading to communal expressions of sexual freedom or symbolic acts that encouraged bountiful harvests, perhaps even blending with the concept of sacred prostitution. It's like a very specific, ancient license to let loose, but only on designated holy days and with divine permission. Historians still argue whether the occasional ritual, sexual license associated with intoxication was a deliberate religious practice to mirror divine fertility, or if it was sometimes an unmanaged byproduct of altered states that the Aztec authorities then ritually incorporated or simply tolerated. You observe the careful control surrounding the use of these substances. They were not for casual consumption by everyone. Access was often restricted to priests, shamans, warriors preparing for battle, or participants in specific ceremonies. This wasn't a party drug culture. It was a sacred science, with precise protocols for dosage and context. You see how deeply the Aztecs understood the power of these plants and beverages, treating them with profound respect and caution. Consider the role of these altered states in spiritual insight. Through intoxication, individuals might believe they could communicate directly with deities, receive visions, or gain prophetic knowledge. For a society so deeply intertwined with cosmic forces, these experiences provided a tangible connection to the spiritual realm, influencing decisions from personal matters to affairs of state. It's a powerful reminder that spiritual journeys don't always require years of quiet meditation. Sometimes, a specially brewed drink can get you there faster. This practice of ritual intoxication reveals a nuanced and sophisticated approach to altered consciousness within Aztec society. It highlights a culture that understood the potent connection between mind, body, and spirit, and was willing to explore non-ordinary states of reality to gain wisdom, foster communion with the divine, and ensure the continued prosperity of their world. It underscores a different kind of high, one aimed not just at pleasure, but at profound spiritual revelation and communal well-being. Moving beyond the blurred lines of ritual intoxication, you now step into the vibrant and often boisterous atmosphere of Aztec festivals, communal celebrations that served as focal points for religious devotion, social cohesion, and sometimes a remarkable degree of sexual license. These weren't just ordinary holidays. They were periods of intensified energy where societal norms might loosen, and the pursuit of pleasure, even intimacy, became a sanctioned part of the collective experience. You're observing moments when the empire let its hair down. You might witness throngs of people gathering in the great plazas of Tenochtitlan, adorned in their finest clothing, participating in dances, songs, and elaborate parades. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec religious festivals were elaborate, multi-day events involving communal feasting, dancing, processions, and sometimes sanctioned periods of increased sexual freedom or ritualized intimacy demonstrates how tightly woven religious expression was with social revelry. It's like a combination of Mardi Gras, a rock concert, and a solemn church service, all rolled into one vibrant explosion of culture. You can almost hear the rhythmic drumming and the joyous shouts from the crowds. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is that certain festivals, particularly those dedicated to fertility deities or gods associated with pleasure and excess, like Xochipilli or Macuilxochitl, the five-flower god who presided over feasting, gambling, and sensual indulgence, could involve a loosening of the usual strictures on sexual conduct. This might manifest as more open displays of affection, symbolic acts of fertility, or even a temporary suspension of certain marital prohibitions, allowing for consensual sexual encounters outside of typical norms. It's like a designated what happens at the festival, stays at the festival rule, but with a divine blessing. Historians still argue whether the sexual license during festivals implied widespread promiscuity, or if it referred more to a ritualized and symbolic expression of fertility, distinct from casual or illicit encounters. You observe the palpable sense of communal release. For a society often characterized by strict social hierarchies and rigorous discipline, these festivals provided an essential outlet for collective joy and emotional expression. The shared revelry fostered strong bonds among community members, reinforcing their cultural identity and shared spiritual beliefs. You see how even moments of perceived disorder actually contributed to overall social cohesion. Consider the role of music and dance. These were not just entertainment, but integral parts of the ritual. The repetitive rhythms and movements could induce a trance-like state, further enhancing the sense of communion and liberation. As participants moved together, the boundaries between individuals might blur, fostering a heightened sense of collective identity and shared experience, sometimes leading to more intimate interactions. It's a bit like a rave, but with ancient instruments and a much deeper spiritual purpose. These Aztec festivals highlight a sophisticated understanding of human nature, recognizing the need for both order and release. By ritually channeling certain behaviors into designated periods, the society could maintain its overall structure while allowing for periods of intensified communal bonding and the celebration of life's fundamental pleasures, including sexual ones. You realize that even in a highly structured empire, there was always room for joy, revelry, and a celebration of the passionate side of existence. Moving from the vibrant energy of communal festivals, you now rewind the clock to the earliest stages of Aztec life, infancy and childhood, observing how these formative years were shaped by careful nurturing, early gendered play, and an immediate immersion into the societal conditioning that would define an Aztec individual. You're witnessing the very beginnings of identity formation within a highly structured civilization. You might see an Aztec mother tenderly cradling her newborn, the infant already being ritually washed and given a calendrical name, linking them from birth to the cosmic cycles. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec infants were nurtured carefully, with early rituals like the naming ceremony immediately integrating them into the family and religious calendar, and children's play was often gendered, subtly preparing them for adult roles, highlights a society that began instilling its values from day one. It's like enrolling your child in a cultural immersion program the moment they're born, complete with divine blessings and a predetermined curriculum. You sense the immediate sense of belonging, the weight of tradition. A particularly charming detail you might uncover is the specific toys and games given to children, often designed to mimic adult activities. Boys might play with miniature bows and arrows or toy farming tools, while girls would have tiny metates, grinding stones, or weaving implements. These weren't just for fun. They were crucial tools for early learning, subtly teaching them the skills and responsibilities associated with their future gender roles. It's like a very hands-on, very traditional Montessori school, where every toy is a lesson in societal contribution. Historians still argue whether the early gendered play rigidly determined future adult behavior, or if there was still room for individual aptitude and inclination to shape a child's ultimate profession or social role. You observe the strong bonds within the extended family during these early years. Grandparents and older siblings played significant roles in caring for and educating the youngest members, transmitting stories, traditions, and practical knowledge. Children were rarely left alone, always surrounded by a network of watchful and loving relatives, reinforcing the communal aspect of their upbringing. You see a sense of collective responsibility, a constant presence of guidance and affection. Consider the early moral lessons. Even toddlers would be gently corrected for misbehavior, learning about respect for elders, honesty, and diligence. These lessons were often delivered through simple stories, proverbs, or the direct example of adults, emphasizing the importance of community harmony and personal discipline. It's a bit like living in a constant, low-level seminar on good citizenship, where even your playtime carries a moral message. This meticulous approach to infancy and childhood reveals a society deeply invested in the proper formation of its future citizens. By providing comprehensive nurturing, clear gendered guidance, and constant moral instruction from birth, the Aztecs ensured that each generation would be well prepared to uphold the traditions, fulfill the expectations, and contribute effectively to the prosperity and stability of their empire. You realize that the grandeur of Tenochtitlan was built not just on military might, but on the careful, continuous shaping of every young life within its walls. Building upon the careful nurturing of infancy and childhood, you now witness the revered position of elders' wisdom within Aztec society. These weren't simply old people. They were the living archives of tradition, the indispensable counselors, and the ultimate authorities on matters of life, including providing nuanced sexual advice and imparting profound life lessons. You're observing a societal structure where age conferred not just respect, but immense practical and spiritual power, making them central pillars of the community. You might see a young couple, perhaps struggling with marital discord or seeking guidance on raising a particularly challenging child, approaching a venerated elder whose words are absorbed with profound attention. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec elders were highly respected as keepers of ancestral knowledge, oral histories, and practical wisdom, often serving as primary advisors on personal, familial, and even intimate matters, meant their counsel was sought for everything from health issues to marital disputes and appropriate sexual conduct. It's like having a walking, talking, perfectly calibrated Google for life's most perplexing questions, completely without algorithms or annoying ads. You feel the quiet authority emanating from their patient demeanor, knowing that generations of accumulated experience reside within their gaze. A particularly tender detail you might uncover is how elders often use the Huhu Hetlatoli, or ancient words, formalized speeches and proverbs filled with metaphors and allegories, to convey sensitive information about sexuality, relationships, and the responsibilities of procreation. These weren't blunt directives, but wise, poetic lessons that allowed individuals to absorb truths at their own pace and apply them to their lives. It's like receiving advice wrapped in a beautiful, illustrative poem, making it memorable and deeply personal. Historians still argue whether the elder's role was purely advisory, or if, particularly in cases of severe transgression or communal dispute, their pronouncements on intimate conduct could carry the force of social law or even religious edict. You observe the continuous process of knowledge transfer. Elders didn't just passively wait to be asked. They actively observed, assessed, and proactively shared their wisdom, particularly with younger generations. They ensured that traditions were preserved, moral codes upheld, and the collective memory of the tribe remained vibrant. This informal, yet deeply effective system meant that invaluable lessons were woven into the fabric of daily interactions, from the preparation of sacred meals to the proper conduct during communal ceremonies. You see how this constant mentorship built resilient individuals and cohesive communities, ensuring that the past was always guiding the future. Consider the holistic nature of their advice. Sexual advice from an elder wouldn't just be about physical acts. It would encompass emotional compatibility, spiritual connection, the responsibilities of parenthood, the impact on family honor, and the broader implications for the community. They understood that intimacy was interconnected with all other aspects of well-being, both individual and collective, seeing the human being as a whole, integrated system. It's a comprehensive approach, where every piece of advice connected to the grand tapestry of Aztec life. This profound reverence for elders' wisdom meant that society benefited immensely from the cumulative experience of generations. Mistakes were learned from, successes replicated, and traditions adapted, all under the guiding hand of those who had lived through much and seen even more. It underscores a fundamental difference from cultures that often sideline their older generations, failing to tap into the rich reservoir of lived experience that elders embody. It's a powerful reminder that true progress often lies in honoring the past while embracing the future, a lesson you realize is profoundly relevant in any age, even now in 2025. Following the profound counsel of elders' wisdom, you now turn your gaze to the visual language of Aztec society, clothing and adornment. These weren't merely coverings for the body, they were elaborate statements of social status, tribal affiliation, and often subtle yet potent sexual cues. You're observing a culture where every bead, feather, and embroidered thread told a story, sometimes whispering messages of attraction and desirability. You might see a nobleman draped in a richly woven cotton cloak, tilma, embroidered with intricate designs, or a woman wearing a beautifully patterned huipili, tunic, with a detailed skirt quaitel. This mainstream historical fact that Aztec clothing and personal adornment were highly regulated indicators of social status, profession, and tribal identity, and also frequently incorporated symbolic elements related to fertility, beauty, and sexual maturity, meant that one's attire communicated volumes about their place in society and their allure. It's like a very elaborate walking billboard for your personal brand and availability, all without uttering a single word. You appreciate the visual richness, the meticulous detail in every garment. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is the specific use of certain colors, patterns, or accessories that subtly hinted at a person's sexual availability or marital status, especially for women. For instance, a particular way of braiding hair with certain ribbons or wearing specific types of jewelry might signal readiness for marriage or a desire to attract a partner during festivals. It's like a secret fashion code, understood only by those in the know, allowing for discreet flirtation across a crowded marketplace. Historians still argue whether the subtle sexual cues in clothing were universally understood by all social strata, or if they were primarily an elite form of communication, with commoners relying on more direct or contextual signals. You observe the remarkable craftsmanship involved in creating these items. Weaving was a highly esteemed skill, particularly for women, and the quality of their textiles reflected directly on their status and diligence. Feathers were meticulously arranged, precious stones carefully carved, and gold finely worked into elaborate jewelry. You see how the creation of beautiful adornment was itself an act of devotion and skill, adding layers of value to the wearer. Consider the contrast between daily wear and ceremonial attire. While everyday clothing was practical and suited to labor, ceremonial dress was designed to be dazzling, transforming the wearer into a heightened, almost divine version of themselves for rituals, feasts, or important social gatherings. These grand outfits, often adorned with symbols of fertility and power, also amplified any underlying messages of allure. It's like putting on your best outfit for a special date, but that outfit is also a prayer and a declaration of your place in the cosmos. This elaborate system of clothing and adornment reveals an Aztec society that understood the profound power of visual communication, using dress to articulate everything from social hierarchy to personal desires. It highlights a culture that embraced the aesthetic celebration of the human form and was adept at weaving subtle sexual cues into the very fabric of their daily and ceremonial lives. You realize that even in a society without modern advertising, the body itself, beautifully adorned, was a powerful message board. From the intricate statements of clothing and adornment, you now investigate the practical dissolution of unions, divorce practices. For the Aztecs, marriage was a serious, often arranged affair, aimed at stability, but it was not an unbreakable chain. Divorce was permissible, often a relatively simple process, and mediated by family or legal authorities, revealing a pragmatic approach to enduring marital unhappiness. You're examining a system that prioritized familial and communal harmony over forced individual suffering. You might hear a couple, after a period of irreconcilable differences, presenting their case to a council of elders or a local judge, outlining their reasons for wishing to separate. This mainstream historical fact that divorce was permitted in Aztec society and was generally a relatively straightforward process initiated by either spouse for various reasons, such as sterility, cruelty, desertion, or severe neglect of duties, indicates a remarkable societal flexibility compared to many contemporary cultures. It's like having a prenuptial agreement that comes with an off-ramp built right in, ensuring that misery wasn't necessarily a life sentence. You sense the pragmatic nature of their laws, designed to keep social units functional, even if that meant dissolving a specific bond. A particularly empathetic detail you might uncover is that in cases of divorce, the children often remained with the father, particularly sons, as lineage was patrilineal for many groups, though daughters might stay with the mother. However, the division of property was often fair, with each party generally taking what they brought into the marriage. This practical approach aimed to minimize disruption and ensure both parties could re-establish themselves. It's like a very amicable separation, where the focus is on a clean break and future stability for everyone, including the kids, even if the custody arrangements might seem unusual to modern eyes. Historians still argue whether the ease of divorce led to frequent marital breakups, or if the social pressures and importance of family reputation meant that divorce, while permissible, was still a relatively uncommon occurrence. You observe the role of family mediation. Before a formal divorce, families or elders would often attempt to reconcile the couple, emphasizing the importance of their union to the broader clan and community. Only after these efforts failed would the formal process begin, highlighting a commitment to preserving marriages when possible, but accepting their dissolution when necessary. You see a preference for resolution, but an understanding of when a relationship truly reached its end. Consider the implications for individuals post-divorce. Both men and women were generally free to remarry, and their social standing was not significantly tarnished, especially if the divorce was justified by the stated grounds. This allowed individuals to seek new partnerships and contribute to society, rather than being ostracized. It reflects a societal value on continued productivity and partnership, rather than punitive judgment. It's a pragmatic second chance, allowing life to move forward. This system of permissible divorce reveals a practical and adaptable aspect of Aztec society, prioritizing the well-being and functionality of its members over rigid, unbreakable marital bonds. It highlights a culture that understood the complexities of human relationships and provided legal and social mechanisms to manage marital failure, ensuring that individuals could continue to contribute to the community. You realize that for all their strict laws in other areas, the Aztecs were surprisingly progressive when it came to ending unhappy marriages. From the practicalities of divorce, you now turn to specific, often overlooked, social categories within the Aztec Empire: eunuchs and servants. These individuals occupied specialized roles, often without the same reproductive rights or social standing as other members of society, highlighting the intricate and sometimes hierarchical nature of Aztec social stratification, even in its intimate dimensions. You're exploring the nuances of personal liberty and societal function in specific, dedicated roles. You might hear hushed discussions about individuals, perhaps captives or those from lower social strata, who were assigned to roles requiring absolute discretion or specialized care. While the concept of deliberately castrated eunuchs in the exact same sense as those in, say, the Byzantine or Chinese empires isn't well documented or widespread in Aztec sources, this mainstream historical fact that Aztec society included various classes of servants, retainers, and specialized attendants, including some who might have been captives or tribute, or those in particular cults, whose lives were dedicated to the elite or to specific ritual duties, potentially limiting their personal and reproductive freedoms, points to a spectrum of personal autonomy. It's like a very exclusive, often involuntary, service industry, where your life's purpose is defined by your master's needs, and your own desires take a back seat. You sense the silent dedication, the often unseen labor that underpin the lives of the elite. A particularly intriguing detail you might uncover is that some of these specialized servants or retainers, particularly those attending to noblewomen or serving in religious cults, might have lived lives largely devoid of traditional marital or family structures. Their intimate lives, if they existed, would have been highly constrained by their duties, their status, and the expectations of their masters or religious orders. It's like being perpetually on call, with your personal life permanently placed on standby. Historians still argue whether such individuals were completely barred from any form of intimate relationships, or if clandestine or less conventional partnerships might have existed for them outside of formal societal recognition. You observe the meticulous dedication of these individuals. They might have served in royal palaces, maintaining records, preparing food, or acting as personal attendants to the Tlatoani or his wives. Others might have been dedicated to temple service, performing menial but necessary tasks that supported the elaborate religious rituals. Their lives, though not those of the ruling class, were nevertheless integral to the functioning of the complex Aztec state and its elite households. You see the quiet efficiency, the silent dedication required for their specialized roles. Consider the origins of such servitude. Some individuals might have been war captives, their lives spared but their freedoms surrendered. Others might have been born into servitude or sold into it due to economic hardship, a form of temporary or lifelong debt. For some, dedicating themselves to a temple or a noble house might have offered a degree of security, albeit at the cost of personal autonomy. It's a stark reminder that even in a seemingly thriving empire, freedom was not a universal given, and personal destinies were often dictated by circumstance. This examination of eunuchs and servants reveals the hierarchical nuances of Aztec society, where personal freedom and reproductive rights were not universally enjoyed. It highlights a system where some individuals existed outside the conventional marital and familial structures, dedicated to specialized roles that supported the elite or the religious institutions. You realize that while much of Aztec life was about fertility and lineage, there were also those whose lives, by circumstance or design, existed on the margins of such expectations, fulfilling different, equally necessary, roles within the grand scheme of the empire. Emerging from the specific constraints faced by servants, you now arrive at the profound and often paradoxical culmination of Aztec beliefs, the intricate relationship between death and sexuality, where concepts of mortality were deeply intertwined with regeneration, symbolic rebirth, and the continuous cycles of life and afterlife. This wasn't an end. It was a transformation, a return to the cosmic womb that perpetually birthed new existence. You're examining a worldview where the final breath was also a promise of new beginnings. You might see a funeral procession, solemn but not despairing, acknowledging the passing of a life but also its inevitable return to the earth, the source of all fertility. This mainstream historical fact that for the Aztecs, death was not an absolute end but a cyclical transformation, often seen as a necessary part of regeneration and a return to the earth womb, with specific deities presiding over both death and new life, like Kotlakeu, the Earth Mother who both devours and gives birth, profoundly shaped their understanding of existence. It's like a cosmic recycling program, where nothing truly vanishes, it just changes form, ready to sprout anew. You feel a sense of profound continuity, even in the face of loss. A particularly poignant detail you might uncover is the specific destinations of the dead, which were often linked to their manner of death rather than their moral conduct. Warriors who died in battle and women who died in childbirth, seen as female warriors, were especially honoured, going to the house of the sun, and sometimes even accompanying the sun on its daily journey. These were considered highly fertile, potent deaths, ensuring the continuation of cosmic life. It's like a celestial hall of fame, where the most intense acts of life-giving or life-taking granted you the best afterlife perks. Historians still argue whether the concept of an afterlife for women dying in childbirth truly elevated their status to that of warriors, or if it was a symbolic honour intended to emphasize their crucial role in population growth and the sustenance of the empire. You observe the meticulous burial practices, where the deceased were often interred with grave goods that included personal items, food, and sometimes fertility symbols, ensuring their well-being on the journey to the afterlife or aiding in their eventual rebirth. The very earth was seen as a nurturing force, receiving the dead back into its embrace to prepare for new cycles of growth, mirroring human procreation. You see the deep respect for the body, even in death, as a vessel that held the sacred spark of life. Consider the symbolic imagery that permeated Aztec thought. The skull, far from being merely a symbol of morbid decay, was often used as a powerful emblem of regeneration and the vitality of life that springs from death. Images of Zompantli, skull racks, at temples, while terrifying to conquistadors, were also profound statements about the continuous cycle of life, death, and sacrifice, linking human mortality to the cosmic forces of creation. It's a powerful, unsettling blend of destruction and generation, where even the end serves a greater purpose. This profound intertwining of death and sexuality reveals an Aztec worldview where mortality was not feared as an ending, but embraced as an essential, often fertile phase of an ongoing cosmic cycle. It highlights a culture that found meaning and even beauty in decay, seeing it as the necessary compost from which new life, new forms, and new generations would continuously emerge. You're left with the quiet, comforting thought that in the Aztec cosmos, even the most final of farewells was just another intimate embrace, a whispered promise of rebirth. As the echoes of ancient Tenochtitlan fade, the vibrant images of Aztec life and the intricate dance of their intimate practices begin to recede into the peaceful mists of your mind. The drumming softens, the chanting stills, and the vivid colours of feathered headdresses and embroidered tunics gently blur. You've journeyed through a world where human desires, societal structures, and cosmic beliefs were inextricably woven into a tapestry far richer and more complex than you might have imagined. Let the fascinating paradoxes, the startling customs, and the profound wisdom of their holistic worldview settle softly, like dust motes catching the last rays of a setting sun. The stories now mingle with your own dreams, becoming part of the quiet understanding that the human experience, across millennia and cultures, is endlessly diverse, endlessly surprising, and endlessly connected. As your eyelids grow heavy and the whispers of history merge into the comforting silence, know that these tales, once bizarre, now simply enrich the vast, quiet landscape of your knowledge. Sleep deeply, my friend, and dream of ancient worlds. Sweet dreams.